Rolling, rolling, rolling. Who sings that? Is that Fred Durst? No, I think that was me singing that. No. Kevin's been like annoyingly on point today.
I don't even know what that means.
And
frankly, I'm gonna take it like an insult.
I mean,
to which I say,
definitely not a compliment.
Joey,
so.
I thought we were friends. Let me see, how's that? Oh, that's not working.
We haven't gone to see anything with Movie Pass since you forced me to see that really awful movie.
Okay, so. Nobody fucking forced you. In fact, you invited yourself to my thing.
That's not true, because I was gonna go see The Shape of Water, and then you were like,
"No, you weren't.
Or we could go see Downsizing." Can you put? I'm not a liar. That's exactly how it happened. Cool, Greg. Can I get a ruling? But only if you're gonna be on my side.
There you go.
Okay. Oh yeah. So I was asking the chat earlier.
No, you weren't.
What some of our other favorite fun clips were over the past few months, because maybe we're adding some new intros to the Kind of Funny Morning Show.
I haven't heard that yet. We're adding intros? What is this?
Oh, cool, Greg. Can you go turn down the volume on my laptop? Because I have the stream up and I can hear it.
Cool, Greg. Turn it up all the way. I wonder.
It's on this. Nonsense. You could do it on the desktop, or there's a button on the right side.
You can do whatever you
want to do. So yeah. So I did the.
What's going on with my hair in the Kev cam?
If you guys have fun ones, just tweet them to me, and I'll go through it.
And if you have lame ones, you're gonna be banned forever on Twitch. So watch
we're not even on Twitch, Kevin.
I know, but we'll find their names.
The giant shrimp one that Nick loves. I don't remember what that one is.
Really, I don't think that's funny. Someone just being like, "Oh, look, it's a giant shrimp," and that's it.
What was the one that everyone was laughing at yesterday?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Was there one that was from yesterday? No.
Oh, I wasn't on the shows.
Oh, that's right. Maybe it wasn't yesterday then, because I wasn't here either.
Okay, there we go. All that weird shit has stopped.
Well, I don't remember what else I was gonna say. Chat, tell me how you're doing. Cool, Greg. Tell me how you're doing. I saw that you tweeted out that you have a big weekend going on.
Yeah, I do have there's a lot going on.
Come tell me about your big weekend, Cool Greg.
I have a bad memory, so I don't know all the details. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
real quick, am I involved in this weekend at all?
You are for the Royal Rumble watch along.
This weekend?
Yeah.
Sunday.
All right.
Right? You don't have to be, but...
No, I'm in.
Yeah, you said last time, and
I didn't realize it was this weekend.
Up some cover art or whatever.
Nice.
So, but yeah, Jay-Z's getting an award for Industry Icon Award, right?
Finally. Which I feel like is probably, he's due for something like that for sure.
There we go. It's money. He's also getting an award for... You going, man?
Yeah, we're good.
All right.
Perfect. Well, Jay-Z's getting awards. That's the big news that Cool Greg has for you this weekend. Also, I think we're doing a Royal Rumble watch-along, so keep an eye out for info on that.
Awards for what?
Being a badass?
Oh, really? That's awesome.
He's up for 8 Grammys, 1 Industry Icon Award, and something about... I'm not really sure I want to phrase it wrong, but lesbians are honoring him because his mom came out in the song.
Oh, wow.
So it's like an impact thing. Yeah, I don't know.
Huh. Interesting. Very cool, very cool.
Tim, you slacked me.
I did. That's the run of show, lightly.
Okay.
This is nice. This is
it's so fun. Yeah.
very nice and
Why
chill.
isn't it going? Oh, it's paused. That's why.
Yeah, I've done a couple songs with him. Yeah, he's fucking great. Do you produce music at all? No.
I have his CD on my desk.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he's awesome. He's a good friend of mine. I did the weirdest shoot with him this year.
In Florida, right?
I went to Florida with Megaran, and we played Mario Kart on Switch on hovercrafts. So we were just basically just whipping around the Florida Everglades on hovercrafts. It's fucking nuts. And then we got rained out one day, so we ended up in Bumblefuck, Florida for the night. And they were I want to say they're 2 feet off the ground, and it's really funny because we were shooting with drones. So we went back and watched the footage, and I was like, oh shit, I went right over a fucking alligator.
No, they're fine. They can take that.
Yeah, I think I hit him right in the mouth or something. He was just ah. But I'm watching the footage, and you just see my hovercraft just boom, boom, and just go right over an alligator's head. And I'm like, oh my God.
That's hilarious. Yeah, the XGC. Extreme Gaming Challenge?
Yeah, my God. That was
ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous. It was just I would just get a phone call, and they're just like, hey, you and Nick and Tim were going to ride dune buggies. That was such a fucking fun day.
It was so fun.
It was so stupid. It was so stupid. Like it didn't make any sense. Like we could barely see the video game.
Yeah, God, that was a joke.
I
I was
told
so
them-
jealous because I wanted to do the zero gravity one.
Oh, me too.
Because that looked awesome.
Me too. That was the one where I was like, I really want to do. Yeah, they sent 2 women that we work with, Alana and Naomi, up into basically this. It's like a plane that simulates 0G by dropping so fast that you just fucking float for a full minute. So for 60 seconds, you're in like a wingsuit and you're just like, and you can just like flip around and do cartwheels and shit, like eat potato chips in the air. Like they had a Nintendo Switch, they were just spinning around in the air. Like
Tight.
it's fucking nuts.
I want to do it.
Tight.
What's up to the chat? If you guys can hear us.
Yeah, they're there.
How are you all? It's good to see you. It's good to be back here.
Yeah, we finally have Altano back on the show. It's literally been year. Well, you've never been on Gamescast.
No, never been on the Gamescast. I did the weight loss show last year, and then that was
you
it.
did the Patreon exclusive with Nick last year. And
Yeah.
before that, I think your last appearance was on Game Over Greggy's show, episode 8, I want to say.
Oh my God, is that true?
At the old house.
Oh, where we talked about Mighty Ducks or something? Oh, no, I was on.
That was Conversation with Colin.
Yes, I was on a show with you guys where we talked about
Ellen Page coming out.
Ellen Page coming out. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how long ago it was.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Holy
Damn.
shit.
Damn.
Yeah, it's fucking stupid how busy we all are.
It
so
is.
It's like,
It really is. Because we've tried getting you on this on Gamescast for
literally
ever, and
years.
then there's always a ton of things that get in the way,
Yeah.
and like either we're gone or you're gone or whatever.
exactly. Yeah, I'll be back for the
Because that's the
PlayStation
thing
7
is,
launch.
if there is a show, if we're not hosting it, you guys are hosting it.
Yeah.
And if you guys aren't, we are.
Yeah,
so.
it's kind of fucking nuts because it's like you'll text me and I'm like, Thursday's bad. I'm doing like NVC up at noon, and then we're doing a pickup thing for Beyond. And it's like we're all making shit in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And like for me to do this show, I have to not do another show, and for you to do my show, you have
It's
to not
always
do
the
your
trade-off.
show.
Yeah.
That said, I want to get you on NVC pretty soon.
Gotta do it, man.
Yeah, I was talking.
I've been itching for it. I
you
have not
Philip?
met the new guy yet.
Yeah,
no.
Philip's great, super nice guy. He ran his own YouTube channel, and now he just jumped in headfirst into NVC stuff. But yeah, it's been really good.
Yeah, should be good. All right, you ready to go, Kev?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
I didn't know how to pronounce these for the longest time.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody. I just started calling him LaCrouche.
LaCrouche.
So I was like, no one will say this. And
That is
the
amazing.
X can be a hard CH.
Yeah.
Like LaCouche.
It is LaCroix if you haven't found out eventually. Yes.
I know. I was calling him LaCroix for a while. They're like from Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, like Wisconsin or something super random.
It's one of those things like Jägermeister where I was like, surely this is made in like the forests of Scandinavia.
It's like,
and
no.
no, this is from like New Jersey.
We good? Yeah. All right. What's up, guys? Welcome to the first ever episode 155 of the Kind of Funny Gamescast. As always, I'm Tim Gettys, joined by, for the first time ever, Brian Altano.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see
I
you,
want
Tim.
the brat. You got to give me the.
Brat, brat.
There you go.
I heard
There
Greg's
you
been
go.
doing that. What the fuck?
Has he?
I came down here specifically to kick his ass, and he's in Canada hiding. Greg, I'm in your house ready to beat you up, and you're not here. That's fucked up, man.
I don't know. Has he done it? I don't think he did.
People in my mentions.
Maybe-
Hey, he's taking it back. He never had
Oh,
it.
you can take it back.
He never had it. That catchphrase stealing motherfucker.
One of the coolest dudes in video games, Greg Miller, is actually up in the cold right now,
Yep.
up in Montreal with Genevieve St. Onge Miller. He'll be back next week. So for this, we decided to do a really special episode of Gamescast. I was like, we don't have anything specific on the dock.
Right, it's
to do.
January,
Yeah,
you know, it's a
there's
slow
not
time of
too
year.
much going on. So I was like, I want to do a nice little one-on-one with Brian Altano. I want to hear about his history in video games since he was a wee little lad back in Brooklyn. You from Brooklyn?
I was
feel like you're from Brooklyn.
I was born in Secaucus, New Jersey. First of all, thank you again so much for having me. Of
course.
And if I haven't said it to you specifically, congrats on your success here. The studio is fantastic. Your crew is
Appreciate
awesome.
it.
I love all
you.
these people back here. It's good to be in the building. Yeah, man. Let's do this. Let's talk video games.
Let's just get right into it.
Yeah.
Well, first off, this is the Kind of Funny Games cast. Each and every week right here on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames, we get together and talk about video games and all the things that we love about them. You can get it early on patreon.com/kindoffunnygames. You get it a whole 3 days early on Friday, or else you get it late on Monday, both at 9 a.m. It's a beautiful time to be alive for
Get on that
everybody.
Patreon.
But
Take
you can
care of these
also,
boys.
yeah, please take care of us. And also, you can listen to it on podcast services around the globe. If you would rate and review them, especially on iTunes, that would would mean a lot to us. So thank you for all of your continued support. And thank you to Tom Bach, our Patreon producer, who's a fantastic gentleman. He's a very good-looking dude. He has a beautiful family, and I support his endeavors, especially when those endeavors include supporting us on Patreon.
He just won the Sexiest Man on Earth award for the 7th year in a row, which is insane. And he has the most abs, and he can crush an entire 12-pack of beer against his forehead without crying. Fucking amazing, dude.
It's pretty damn impressive.
Just unbelievable.
I want to jump right into it, Altano.
Why did that get Kevin so good?
Because Kevin just needs a laugh every once in a while. What have you been playing?
Weirdly, I jumped back into Bloodborne this year. I was not expecting to, but this is that time of year where we're always like, we're going to catch up on the shit we missed last year, the year before. You know, everybody has that sort of like rainy day fund of like video games they want to go back to. And you feel bad, especially, you know what it's like, man. Like we work in the industry and it's like, I never ever complain about my job because it's fantastic, but it's also a big specific part of our jobs is to stay up on shit. And a lot of that really means that it means like dipping one toe into a game for a couple hours and kind of getting your feet wet a little bit and then saying like, all right, no, I got to move on to the next thing. So I'll really get into a game and then I'll have to stop because it's like, oh, this came out or this came out or this came out. And for some odd reason this year I was like, Bloodborne is one of my favorite games of all time. It's the game that I think has made me sort of like feel something the most from a video game.
I never really played it because the whole Dark Souls Soulsborne games like intimidate me.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I think that's like, first of all, they are intentionally obtuse and difficult, and like as I've said before, the audience mantra around it is basically "fuck you, get better." Get good is what everyone says, which is like not really what you want to hear when you're not good. Like when you're like, oh, I want to get good. Everyone's like, but you got to get good. And you're like, but how do I fucking get good? And they're like, just get good. And you're like, well, that's like when you're 5 and someone's like, well, why is this like this? And they're like, well, because. You're like, well, that's not an argument. So I jumped back into Bloodborne, I think looking to sort of like feel something cool from a video game. And what I think Bloodborne does really well is it is terrifying. So there's that feeling, there's fear, right? And it's very different than say something like Super Mario Odyssey, which is like joy. Yeah. Like you're playing Mario Odyssey, you're like, yeah. And everyone's like, wahoo. And you're jumping on shit and everyone's your friend, even when you're not, you steal their clothes and their hats and shit. And it's great. You become the lizard. You do all the fun stuff.
Become the lizard.
Bloodborne is like, they just kind of drop you in and you wake up in a hospital and their wolf tries to kill you. And you're like, I don't know what the fuck this is. I don't remember what this is like. I finished that game before and, playing it 2 years later made it feel entirely new. And it's weird to have like comfort food that pushes back. It's sort of just like if one of your favorite things to do, like when you were sick, was to have like the world's spiciest tortilla chip or something. You're kind of like most people go for like chicken soup and grilled cheese and stuff like that. Like, like your Link to the Past, your Grand Theft Autos, your Mario 3. Like some of us even play like The Last of Us a bunch of times. Bloodborne was one of those ones where I'm like, this is comfort food for me, even though it's fucking devastatingly brutal and difficult. And it's disgusting. Like everything you fight in that game is like it's like a wet horse woman skeleton. And there's like, you turn the corner and there's just like fucking dudes with pitchforks and flames trying to kill you. And it's just an awful, gross, mean, shitty, cruel game. And I love fighting in it because I incrementally become better at it. Yeah. And then you're all of a sudden kind of like, I'm accomplishing something, which I think when we sit down with our finite time to play video games, you can do something that's sort of just waste some time and walk away, or you can get a little bit better at something. And I think that's what draws me to that game specifically.
That's why I loved Cuphead so much last year, where I mean, it has all the sensibilities that I love in a video game, but it does have that challenge factor where I feel like I was accomplishing something and I wasn't just wasting my time.
I was going to ask you about that because you like really locked into that game, but you're not somebody I would normally describe as somebody that moves, like gravitates towards brutally difficult.
Not hard. I'm not the hard difficulty guy. I like just like getting through experiences and just being happy with them. Like I'll take a journey any day.
Yeah, right? There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But there's nothing wrong with playing games on easy.
I love 2D platformers, and I don't play games on easy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm a normal guy, right? I don't need to bump it up hard and whatever. I'm not down for that. But with Cuphead, I played it through on normal, and I did beat it. It's in my Twitter bio for proof. But I love it. But it's like I've said this before on the show, but that game, it made me feel like I was accomplishing something. But I wanted to give back to the developers by beating it, like they put so much work and effort into the designs and the look and the feel of the game that I was like, I owe it to them to get to that final boss and to see everything the game had to offer, because they designed it with, not only did it look beautiful, but it was designed beautifully in terms of the progression and how each boss fed into the next one. And it's funny because I actually popped it in a couple days ago, and it's been a while, and went back to some of the early bosses. I'm like, oh my God, these are so easy.
Oh, you
and
just like flew through it?
Yeah.
Oh,
and I'm just
so
like,
cool.
it's so funny that it's like, especially because you get the other weapons make some of the early boss fights really easy.
Right.
But it's rewarding. And that's what video games can do. That's the magic of them, is they make you feel like a fucking badass.
I really like your attitude on that, because I never really thought about, and like, you know, it's part of my job as a loud, stupid mouthpiece in the industry to figure out ways to give back to the creators and the creative people making games. And one of the ways I do that is to sort of like, you know, find weird indie games and small teams working on small things and talk about them at lengths and give them some spotlight. But I've never really heard it put like, I owe it to them to finish it, because I think that's my best way of showing my gratitude. Like that's the way we sort of, and again, another metaphor, but the way we treat food.
Yeah.
Is like when you sit down at someone's house, if you like clear your plate, that's sort of like you showing them that you really love the dinner, right?
Yeah.
And in some cultures like Japan, you burp afterwards, which I guess for you is a podcasting about it. Yeah. And so I think that's a really warm, really cool attitude to have.
I mean, man, that game is so special. And for anybody that gave it a try and thinks it's too hard, I really think you should just stick at it for a little longer and see if maybe you can push through, because it is designed that way. And I feel like that game, it is the perfect balance of amount of content, because I feel like any more and it would have maybe outstayed its welcome.
Right.
But it was just the right amount for me to be like, wow, there's a lot here. And it took 30 attempts at this boss, but once you get to the new one, it's this fresh new feeling for another 30, and then you just keep going through that cycle. But it's like at every point, I always felt like, oh, there's something I'm moving towards.
There's something on the horizon
Yeah.
that I can.
There's gonna be something even cooler than this.
So let me ask you this then: like, were there was obviously like controller throwing, I give up moments.
Totally.
Was there any like a specific time where you were like, I'm done, I can't do this?
So there was 2 moments playing through it, 2 specific bosses that at this point I don't even remember what they were, where I had tried and I couldn't beat it. And I was just like, maybe this is the point that I just can't get past.
Right.
It wasn't so much me being like, fuck this game. It was more like, I don't know that I could do this. But then in classic video game fashion, you come back the next time and on your second attempt, you beat it.
Yeah, you walk away for a bit,
Yeah.
you put the controller down, and then you come back. Yeah, I did that. I had this whole rant on Podcast Beyond where I did that with Bloodborne. And it was basically like, I titled the video like how I almost quit my game of the year. Because it's kind of like, I was like, fuck this shit. Fuck the cleric beast, this awful giant screaming wolf man. And then like I went back to the bridge and I just whooped this fucking dick and ass all over the street. Just killed him.
That is video games.
Yeah.
Video
and
games are cool.
Yeah, and I was shaking and screaming, and I was like, yeah! And all my neighbors were like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? But I did it, and then I kept going, and then you get killed on the next boss, and the cycle continues. But there's something really, really special about that you don't get from watching a movie, you don't get from reading a book, because games are the only medium that like really push back.
Yeah.
You know, like a movie will happen without you. Like fucking Zod fell asleep watching Batman vs Superman.
Yeah.
And the movie just kept going on the plane. It didn't stop. Like a book, you can just be like, and you just put it away, right? But like a video game will kill you.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
and
And
make
I mean,
you
you
go-
don't get to see the end. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with Cuphead, is like, you don't get to see the brilliance of the cat and mouse boss fight if you didn't get there. You know, I mean, granted, you can YouTube it, and granted, there's ways around it. But it's like, when you earn it, it's like, oh, it's so rewarding. And to answer your question about the giving up points, I will say, and I've said this before in the show, the King Dice fight. Did you beat Cuphead?
No.
Okay.
No, not yet.
The second to last boss is this King Dice thing, and it is the only point in the game that I think is not fairly balanced and is unnecessary, and because it's not just that it's hard, it's more just how long it takes, because there's a lot of different forms for it, and like you roll the dice, and instead of facing off against one boss, you have to face off against upwards of like maybe 10 bosses depending on what the dice rolls
and the
are.
checkpointing gets crazy, right?
Yes,
that's to me like the one thing where I'll get into like the nitty gritty about why that starts to, and I hate using the word, but it starts feeling cheap.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of just like if I have to run like 20 minutes to get to the thing that's going to kill me.
Exactly.
And it's like, that's not necessarily like, I'm not learning anything from
Yep.
that, you know, like.
And I think that's the big problem is because while it was rewarding to replay the same boss 30 times
30
when the
times.
boss fights are 2 minutes,
Yep.
you know, max, when you're facing a boss that takes 10 minutes total and you're failing over and over, it gets to a point where you're like, all right, I can do this. And then when you make stupid mistakes, you just get frustrated. And it's not fun.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's funny because, you know, we've seen such a resurgence of retro games where at this point, retro games aren't even retro anymore. They're just kind of a modern style of game with like pixel art.
You're so right.
all these-
It's sort of like the way, like I've seen people do like musicians who are like, hey, my new album's like very Stranger Things. And I'm like, wait, what? Because like Stranger Things is very like Vangelis and like John Carpenter. And it's like you're mimicking a style that's mimicking a style.
And at this point, it's just a genre. So like Super Meat Boy and, you know, like all the Million Towerfall and all the games.
Celeste, which just came out, which you should totally check out.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like the IGN review totally sold me.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it
it was
looks cool, but 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
Let's go.
Yep.
But I just feel like that's just a style and Shovel Knight and things like that. But it's funny because, you know, it's like, oh, it's a throwback to games of yesteryear. But in a lot of ways, it's like it modernizes them in the right way.
Yes.
So Cuphead is an example of, hey, there's challenge here, and it's hard like video games used to be, except it's not, because video games used to be, if you failed at the boss, you have to start from the beginning of the level again. And there's no save points. All this. That's stupid.
Dude, like we had my friend had Ninja Turtles for the NES, the original one. Fuck that game. Fuck everything.
And fuck
about
that game, right?
Fuck that game.
If
Like,
that game was remade now, it could be awesome.
It could be
if
awesome.
there was a better save system, if there's a better way of progression. But when your 4 turtles die and you're fucking dead, and you have to start the whole game
over and do the bomb defusing stage again.
Why?
My friend, I was at a sleepover and we had stayed up all night playing it, and we got up to Shredder, and my friend paused the game because we were like bleary eyed, and we're like, we're gonna wake up, eat pancakes, and kill Shredder. Like a perfect Saturday. And my friend and my friend's dad walked in and he's like, breakfast is ready, and just kicked the NES by accident. And it just did that thing where it's just like, and all the characters popped up on the screen. Like you see Raphael's eye and it's like Splinter's dick, and they're just all like merged together. And it says like, bleh, and we're just like, and just froze. And what can you do?
What
Nothing.
do you do?
You gotta start over.
That's it, man. That fucking game. It's so funny because that game has such intrinsic memories for so many people of a certain generation. And like, man, me and Kevin played the fuck out of that game. And no matter how many times,
did you play that recently or as kids?
As kids.
Oh, that's so funny.
No matter how many times we played that damn game and loved that game because you're playing Ninja Turtles. Like, are you fucking kidding me? No matter how many hours we sunk into that thing, no matter how many times we replayed it, we got past the dam. We did the whole fucking stupid ass bomb defusal. Then you have to play that next level where you're in the dam. Then the next level is you're in the van. The turtle van, and you're going around. Never made it past that.
No one has. No one ever has.
Not fucking once, man. It's just like you're talking about Shredder. Was Shredder in the game? I'll never know.
Yeah, dude. I watch like speed runs of that game every now and then just to watch like these fucking like day walking Neos take over that thing, and I'm just like, how the fuck? Like they're handling stuff. They're speaking a language I just don't understand. But the thing is, when you're a kid, like you don't know like if somebody's cooking is shitty because you haven't had great cooking, and there was no reviews really back then. Like you knew you loved the Turtles, so fuck yeah, you're gonna play the Turtles video game. But you didn't understand that you were playing a not good video game based on the Turtles. You just kept playing it because you're like, I love the Turtles. I got to beat the Shredder. That's my mission.
Dude. Hey man, I'm here. April, I'm saving you.
Yep, exactly. Poor woman never got saved apparently. In that game.
Man. Well, I feel like this is a perfect segue. Altano, what is your gaming history? I want to start at the very beginning. Like, what was the first games you played, the first consoles you owned, and then kind of give me your story as you grew up and maybe the key games and memories that.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, man. My earliest memory playing a video game was I was born in Secaucus, New Jersey, which is basically northern New Jersey, right next to Jersey City. Jersey City is like a grimier version of New Jersey, which is funny because people think of New Jersey and they think of like a grimier version of literally anywhere else. So it's like, no, this is a grimier version of the grimier version. Like this was the armpit of the asshole of New Jersey.
Good Lord. That is graphic.
Is rough. But we were known for a few things. One of them was probably killings, and number 2 was pizza. And so my dad took me to a pizza place on the corner, like an old pizza parlor, and they had a Donkey Kong arcade cabinet. This is my first time seeing an arcade cabinet, and also seeing like, the weird thing about arcades was when you were a kid, it meant that you could see a TV in a place that wouldn't normally have a TV, like a laundromat, a restaurant. You'd be like, why is there a TV here, and what does this TV do? And it's like, well, this TV does one thing. Donkey Kong. And you're like, well, what the fuck is that? So I asked my dad about it.
That is such a great way to put it.
It's weird, right?
Yeah.
It's so weird when you think about it. So my dad, he was like, my dad was really into pinball. So he's like, do you want to check this out? And I was like, sure, what is it? Gave me a cord, I put it in. I couldn't reach, so he picked me up. And I held the joystick and I put my fingers down and I moved Mario to the right. And I hit the jump button. I'm like, oh, he'll do like what I tell him to do, which is video games. But I didn't know that, right? Because you don't really have, when you're a kid, you have toys, you have action figures, you have cartoons you watch on TV. Video games felt like action figures and toys that you could control, like through a TV, and it made no sense. So I started playing it and I really liked it and I died immediately, like everyone does at Donkey Kong. It's a brutally, brutally difficult game. 30 years later, I would have ended up rebuying a Donkey Kong arcade cabinet to have in my apartment.
That is amazing.
Because it was the first game I ever like sort of interacted with. And I, again, felt like I owed somebody something somewhere.
Even though who made money off of that doesn't matter. It felt good in your heart.
Yeah. So immediately I was like, I learned who Mario was, I learned who Donkey Kong was, and I learned what Nintendo was. I learned that word. Seeing it on something meant that there was something magical and cool inside this box. And so a couple of years later, the Nintendo Entertainment System came out, the NES, and there were a bunch of...
What year were you born?
I was born in 81.
81,
yeah.
okay.
So I think the NES came out in like 85?
In America.
85 in America, 86, 85, 86, something like that. And I got the version of the NES that had Super Mario Brothers, Track and Field, and Duck Hunt on one game, which is, that's fucking insane to hand that to a kid like when he's 5 or 6 years old. Yeah, because it's like
there's 3 here. Remember Donkey Kong where it's just one thing?
Yeah,
there's 3 on
three
this
things,
motherfucker.
and it's like so.
And one has a gun.
Yeah, one has a gun.
One has this thing
one
you
has a
step on,
where you fight animal men and like you chase a bobcat. So that was insane because it was sort of just like you get a gun, you get a running pad, which I was not very happy about, and then you. And you get, I wasn't like a fat kid, but I was fat on the inside. Yeah. And that I didn't want to do anything like that. But then you get Super Mario Brothers, which is like, it's one of the first sort of zeitgeist video games that you could ever play where you would again feel better the more you played it and the better you got at it. But also you would go to school and there'd be this weird zeitgeist to it where people would be like, hey, like if you jump over the ceiling, like you can go to the last world. And you're like, what? What the fuck are you talking about? You know, like, and then everyone had an uncle that worked at Nintendo.
Of course.
Every kid you know is a liar. You know, I knew a guy once that said his cleaning lady was Chun-Li, which literally impossible. She's a cartoon
literally impossible.
Yeah, Blanca was the best man at my wedding. Good talk. So you know, like you would go to school and you would hear about it, and then there was something really cool about that where there was there were trading cards, and there was a Super Mario Brothers TV show, like an animated show. And I found out that the guy, Captain Lou Albano, who played, sounds like my last name, played the Super Mario. His brother taught driver's ed at my high school. And his brother ended up teaching me how to drive. So Super Mario's brother, not Luigi,
the other one,
taught me to drive a car in New Jersey, which is, you know, if you can drive a car in New Jersey, you can drive a car anywhere. So yeah, so I got the NES. I got it from this place called Crazy Eddie's. Crazy Eddie's. I believe this is a tri-state area chain. The guy went out of business for like money laundering. Super shady guy.
Eddie, man.
Crazy Eddie. Like, right? How do you get in business with a guy like that?
Yeah.
So his whole thing was he would just go on TV and yell and scream and be like, we got lamps, we got TVs, we got this. And then he was just like this coked out dude, would just put appliances everywhere. And New Jersey had this thing called the Blue Law where you couldn't buy electronics or liquor, a bunch of other things in northern New Jersey. So we went to New York. We went to New York City, my dad and I. And he was like, it's your birthday. I'm going to get you a Nintendo. I'm going to get you a bunch of games. So I got the Mario one. I got Kid Icarus. I got Life Force. I got Contra, and I got Punch Out.
God.
And looking back, I was like, damn. Oh my God, that's the best birthday of my entire life. Because that felt like 100 years worth of video games when you were a little kid. You know, so I went home and I basically now all of a sudden had this tremendous connection to what Nintendo was making. And I found out
I'm not familiar with Life Force.
So Life Force is made by Konami and it's running in the castle Contra Engine. It has the 30-man code in it, and it's basically a top-down or side-scrolling, because the levels alternate, shooting game for 2 players. So like you and me could sit down and play Life Force, which we totally should because it's fucking awesome, and just basically blast through levels. And it's a shmup. It's like Gradius or like Ikaruga or anything like that. One of the first like shmups I've ever played. Super Japanese, made no sense. The first boss of the game is a brain with arms. It's weird.
Early Konami.
Yeah, early Konami, right? I don't know what
nuts.
the fuck those guys were doing. The same coke as Crazy Eddie. So I fell in love with these games all of a sudden, and that the idea that there were like these big gray blocks that you could plug into something in your TV if you blew into them first, and they would take you away to these magical worlds where your friends would come over and play with you, and it became like a social thing, and we would trade games with each other and all that stuff like that. And I became a Nintendo fan just immediately, right? And then the Super Nintendo came out, and my neighbor got one before me because my neighbor was Jewish, and Hanukkah came before Christmas that year. And I wanted it nothing more than anything in the world. I wanted a Super Nintendo, and I didn't like this guy. Not because he was Jewish, but because he was just a bad dude. To be clear, for any of you who are like, there's one guy like, oh, what's his problem with Jewish people? I get called Jewish all the time. I love them. They're great. I was like, I'm going over there. I'm going to play Super Mario World extensively until Christmas, and then I'm not going to hang out with this kid anymore. And I did. And we went over.
I did.
We went over. We beat Mario World. Like we found like all the secret exits to everything. Peace out. Then I got it for Christmas. I got that and Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Eventually, Link to the Past. You know, and all of a sudden, like those games sounded different than they had fucking orchestras. Yeah. Like you played Super Nintendo games. Like,
you're like, what the fuck is this?
Link to the Past. Exactly. Sean Velasquez who worked on Shovel Knight did my show a couple years ago, and he told me a story about how he was calling into the Nintendo Power Hotline and
1-800-255-3700.
Motherfucker, good shit.
I'm a fucking nerd.
That's so good. And so those guys would sit there. They had basically binders of secrets on video games, like these tomes, these Bibles. And you would call them up and you'd be like, hey, so I'm stuck on like World 6, Level 2 of like Kakariko Village. Like, how do I find the egg? And the guy would be like, hold on. You got to talk to the guy in the tree, and then he'll give you the egg, but you got to give him 4 bullets, and then like you lose a life. And he's like, oh, okay, thanks. And you hang up the phone. That's how like we solved games back then.
Yeah.
There was no
internet.
There's no internet, no Twitch or anything like that.
Well, so I remember there was eventually it turned into a premium service. It was a 1-900.
Yeah.
We had to pay.
Because I think eventually they were like, we got to start charging.
We got to figure it out. And I had to pay to figure out the Forest of Illusion in Super Mario World.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm going in fucking circles.
It's these illusions. So Sean called up the hotline and he was like, I'm not stuck in any games. I just want to know about the Super Nintendo. And the lady was like, this is before it came out. And this lady was like, I'm actually playing Zelda for the Super Nintendo right now. And he was like, no way. Can you put the phone up to the TV? And so she put the phone up to the TV, and you played that game, right?
Yeah.
Link to the Past. When you go in like the dungeons or underground levels in that game, it goes boop, boop, and there's like water dropping noises, which the NES couldn't do water dropping noises. It was just like gurgling garbage. And so he put the phone up and he was like, was that water droplets? And she's like, yeah, you can hear the water droplets in the caves in this game. And he went to school and everyone was like, bullshit. You can't hear the water in the caves. And then the fucking game comes out. Everyone plugs it in. They go underground for the first time. And it's like, bloop, bloop. And you hear them. And they're like, oh, shit. Oh, my God.
Video games.
Yeah. And so like, just to point out, like, that was the level of like incremental joy that we got from evolutionary steps,
which is crazy to look at now, right?
Look at now,
we have the PlayStation 4, which when you compare to the PlayStation 3, it's like it sure is more HD, but it's like back in the day, the idea of bits, the idea of, oh, that was an 8-bit system, but this one is 16. Guess what? Nintendo 64. They put it in the name.
It's in the name.
It meant something. And so it was like, I remember thinking like, what's going to be 128? And then I never really cared.
It was so weird.
I think Dreamcast was.
Yeah, it never really mattered.
PlayStation was 32, but that didn't matter.
I would love if like Nintendo came out and they were just like, the Nintendo Switch is a 4068-bit system, and people are like, that means nothing to me, but I'm glad you're sticking with those naming conventions. So then I went back in time a little bit, and the Game Boy came out, and the Game Boy was really interesting because, and it's a great reference to where we are now with the Nintendo Switch. Technologically, it was a step back from what everyone else was doing, but you could bring it everywhere, and there was this magic to it where you would get on a plane and you would see adult businessmen playing people you would never see with a portable video game system.
Holding
and back
a
then
toaster.
holding this big block. And back then portable gaming systems were effectively Game & Watch, which Nintendo was making, or Tiger Electronics, which were shitty. They were not great. You might love them, you might remember them. They're bad.
Yeah.
Like, and they're not bad because like they didn't mean well, but they were limited, right?
I mean, they're essentially the equivalent of playing the games on the back of a cereal box.
Yeah.
If the cereal box had one of those hologram things where when you turned it, it kind of looked like it did different things.
Well, my joke with the Tiger Electronics is always that when you put batteries in and you hit start, the screen would light up and it would show you everything that game could possibly do
At
ever.
once.
Which is like if you started The Last of Us and like in the window flickering, they showed you the ending of The Last of Us. You'd be like, what the fuck, The Last of Us? So like, those games, throw them right out of the window. But then a game came to the Nintendo Game Boy called Link's Awakening. And Link's Awakening is, to me, my favorite Zelda game of all time. It is not the best Zelda game of all time. I don't think many people would even agree it is. Technically, it's sort of not aged well because you can only map items to 2 buttons because there's only 2 buttons on the Game Boy. So you're constantly hitting start to be like sword, shield, bombs, boomerang, sword, boomerang. Like you're just constantly micromanaging that. But there was this magic to the story, and there was something really fascinating about having a massive world in a portable, so that I could be in a bad mood, or my parents could be fighting with me, and I could like go up to my room and they could be like, no TV tonight. And I'd be like, well, fuck the
Joke's
TV.
on you.
Yeah, I have a TV right here. It's green.
I'm going to talk to a windfish.
And so you would sit down, you'd play that game, and there were secrets in it, and they're all over the place. And I was like, I think this was like probably like 6th grade. And so by then I had a Super Nintendo, I had a Genesis, I had an NES, and you start
You're decked out there.
Yeah, you're decked out. And I was like doing a lot of like chores and yard work and like, just doing everything I can to get money to buy games. And you'd buy shitty games, you'd buy Echo the Dolphin, not a good game. See me in the streets. You'd buy great games like Super Ghouls and Ghosts, which are really hard and really fun. And then you get something like Link's Awakening, which just felt different. It just felt like this magical touch. It's like the difference between going to like Six Flags and going to like Disney. Yeah. Where you're like, they put some work in the animatronics here.
There's some real shit going on.
Yeah, there's a magic
especially
to
looking
this.
at Link's Awakening, it was such a... I mean, that's just back to the glory days of video games where everyone's still kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
But there was still this like drive to create and do something different and use your imagination and never just be cut and paste. I mean, we've talked to death about the NES and how weird the sequels all were.
Yeah.
It's like you look at all the trilogies and it's like number 2s were always fucking
so weird.
But then when they did their Game Boy games, Mario isn't the best example because Mario Land was fucking kind of weird as well.
Yeah, it was weird.
It wasn't good.
But again, it was
good.
strange,
Yeah.
and it was them saying like some of the best video game achievements of all time came from sort of the limitation of the technical
exactly
hardware.
And I think that's where Link's Awakening really, I think Mario Land 1 failed in that they were just like, hey, let's take Mario and just put it portable.
Yeah,
and
make him tiny.
Mario Land 2, that was good. But with Link's Awakening, it was like, hey, okay, Zelda worked. Link to the Past worked. How do we translate that to something that's a portable experience with limited buttons?
Yep.
And how do we make it feel different but still have that special Nintendo, special Zelda feel? And I think their answer was, let's get weird.
Yeah.
Let's create characters that were unlike anything you've seen in the other thing. Like let's have the objectives of the game not be what you'd expect and be based on like dungeon to dungeon, but have the world kind of speak for itself a bit more.
Yeah, it felt like a living, breathing world, which is really interesting to do on like a 4-bit handheld, right? And like we were saying, like some of the best games came from that limitation. Like Mario literally has a mustache because they were like, we don't know how to make a mouth. So they're like, we got to put something under his nose because otherwise he'll just look like a psychopath. Yeah. So we'll give him a mustache, and he still kind of looks like a psychopath, but it's like a lovable version. It's a cute psychopath. And so like that's an interesting thing because we don't really see that happen as much anymore. With technical limitations sort of being removed in many ways. A lot of the stuff that we see now is draw distance, characters on screen, animation sets, how many hours of VO can we put into this? But back then it was sort of just like, we don't know how to make this look good until we like limit ourselves, like how do we make a song with 4 notes? How do you make a character with 4 colors? How do you make a puzzle game with like 8 squares. You know, like what do you do? Like how do you solve for those things? And it's weird. It's sort of trying to live in a small apartment and being like, well, we can make this work. You know, and now everyone has mansions. Tetris, exactly. Just make shit disappear. So the Game Boy was huge for me because it represented something that I could bring anywhere. And it also introduced me to video games.
AA batteries. Oh.
Yeah, AA batteries. Yeah, well, that was the Game Gear. The Game Gear let you burn through 6 of them in 5 minutes. So you could play Ren and Stimpy or something bad like that. There's no good games for that system. Seriously. Like, there really aren't. Like, there's ports of good games that you might remember as being good, but there's really not anything that great for the Game Gear. But I remember going on whatever the fuck the internet was back then and like reading about Link's Awakening. And I read Craig Harris's review on IGN or IGN Pocket or whatever it was called, which is like, or IGN 60. So the Game Boy came after the Super Nintendo and before the N64.
But I mean, Game Boy came out way early.
Yeah.
Did it come out before Super Nintendo? Or after? I think it's before. Wasn't Game Boy 1990?
Yes, I think it was 90.
And then I think SNES was 91.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember when I was reading IGN. So it might have been...
You must have been reading the Game Boy Color.
Yes, I was reading the Game Boy Color version. That's right.
Link's Awakening Deluxe that came out because IGN didn't exist until a little bit later.
So I remember Craig Harris specifically was really into handheld gaming.
Yes.
And I was like, there's a guy in California whose job it is to review portable games, like pocket games. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And so that kind of blew my mind because between that and Nintendo Power, I was like, you can have a job where you talk about video games, you write about video games. And I was like really into reading and really into writing. And the idea of going to school, I was also really into fucking up at school, you know, because I look like this. And like going into school and writing and then going home and being like, I'm reading people writing about video games really inspired me. It made me go like, there's a way to do this, right? It was the same thing like reading like the Source magazine, right? I was like, you can write about hip hop for a living? Like it's fucking awesome. Like the fact that people were getting paid to write about the shit that I loved blew my mind because it's completely unconventional in any sort of like school to sort of to let you think that like most people, it's like, oh, if you like writing, you're gonna become an author, you'll work at the newspaper, you'll write a book, you know, maybe you'll work for like a magazine or something like that. I'm like, you're not really going to work for a magazine that has like a clay version of Mario on the cover of it. So that really inspired me. And then we get into the era of like the N64, right? And the N64 was tremendous because it had 4 controller ports on the front. And I think what people really remember about that system is that it brought people together in a way that I don't think any other system ever had before. Like you think about playing Mario Kart, you think about playing GoldenEye, Smash Brothers, Mario Party, Diddy Kong, all those games that brought people together so they could fight and scream at each other. Yeah. Like it was like this weird thing where it was like we're all getting together to get our anger out on each other. I
mean, really, there's something in human nature that loves competition.
Yeah.
And this was like, hey, all you people that aren't going to throw a ball around, you can be good at something. You know, you can be better than someone else sitting next to you.
Yeah,
like,
it's why I find a lot of like esports so baffling because it's like dudes with jerseys in screaming arenas, and I was like, I signed up to hide from these things. Like, this is not why I'm here. Like, I got here to like huddle over like a small controller with 3 of my friends, and I'm like, I'll fucking kill you. I get to pick the fox, and you're the woman, and then we're gonna fight the plumber, and then like the badger, and we're all gonna kill each other in our cars. And then I see these things, and like, and the winner gets $50 million and a Red Bull sponsorship, and I'm like, video games are sports now. What the fuck happened?
What the fuck happened?
It's awesome. It's awesome to see, right? It's really cool to see. But so at the same time, the PlayStation had just come out, and I didn't really know much about it aside from that it was born from this scorned marriage divorce thing between Nintendo and Sony, and that they had originally tried to make a Super Nintendo together and fell apart. Nintendo was kind of like, fuck you. Everyone should read the book Game Over, by the way, because it really gets into the nitty gritty of like how kind of gross Nintendo was as a company in the olden days.
Well, when you're winning,
you're
an asshole.
They were doing the kind of shit where like if you wanted to rent a game from a Blockbuster, like they were charging Blockbuster like $150 a game. They were charging, because their carts were proprietary, you could only buy a Nintendo or a Super Nintendo or N64 cartridge through Nintendo. They were like, well, the blank carts are $50. I'm like, well, the fucking game is 60.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, I guess figure out what to do with that $10, you know, break it up amongst yourselves. It's like, so you have to give $50 to Nintendo for
and
a
even more than that,
cartridge.
they would limit the publishers
Yeah.
to a certain amount of games per year because they're of their quality assurance.
Right.
So then Konami being like, fuck that, we're gonna start Ultra Games and
Yeah.
put out Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, put out Ninja Turtles. Konami started like a shell organization to sort of be like, hey, this is me. Like, it's basically a pen name,
Yeah.
you know, which is fucking insane. It's fucking insane that would happen. So I remember going to my friend's house and seeing him play games like Metal Gear Solid and Resident Evil for the PlayStation. And that blew my mind because that was sort of just like, I was like, first of all, games are on a CD. Like, how the hell does that work?
And CDs were such novelties. Like,
Yeah.
CDs went during the PlayStation 1 era, like, at least for me, I remember being like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it was
Like-
so fucking cool.
Like, the fuck cassette tapes. Like, what the fuck is this?
Oh my God, man. And it's like the idea of like, first of all, CDs were just awesome looking. They're reflective. Like you could, yeah, it's just kind of, it wasn't like, yeah, it's shiny. It wasn't like this dull gray block, you know, CDs had warning labels in the corner. I would go to Tower Records and there'd be CDs that were just like, if your fucking parents hear this, like they're going to kill you. And I was like, I need to buy this.
Let's go.
Like I had friends that had like, they would buy, it would suck, man. They would go to the hip hop section of Tower and they would buy Method Man's first album. And then they would also buy like, Now That's What I Call Music. And they would take Now That's What I Call Music and make it That's Now What I Call the Garbage Can. And they would put fucking Tikal into That's What I Call Music. So their parents would be like, oh, my good, wholesome son listening to some great music. And it's like, nah, motherfucker, I'm listening to Method Man. It's great. So like, I think there was something magical about CDs. Like, again, they had warning labels on them. And then Sony's entire attitude, the PlayStation attitude of coming in and being like, oh, you want blood? We got blood. Like, you want decapitations and murder? We got all that shit. And Nintendo is just like, we're a family-friendly company, and the blood is green, and Mario rides on his friend, the dinosaur, and they eat apples together, and it's great. And Sony was just like, you want to see a guy get killed? Come on down. So, yeah, I loved getting a PlayStation because it felt different.
Yeah.
It felt weird. It felt
These
grown
games
up.
could be rated M.
Yeah. And it felt really mature in the way that like Sega for the longest time was just like, you want mature? We're mature. I'll throw up on your aunt. And you're like, that's a weird thing to say in a commercial.
It was the Ren and Stimpy
Yeah.
factor. It was that
Yeah.
just kind of gross out.
It was
like,
this gross
adult
out-
means nasty.
Yeah.
And not
which
even
is
in a sex way, just in like a pimple
just
way.
like pimples and puke and just like, yeah, it was shit like that. It was like sex and stuff. And it was just like, not even like great sex. It was just like, it's like, yeah, jerking off like a real adult. You're like, you're fucking gross, Sega. Like, what are you doing? So they'd do shit like that, and there'd be characters like, it's Booger Man, you know, like a real adult. And it's like, that's something a 4-year-old would come up with. So then Sony comes in with PlayStation, and it blows my fucking mind. You know, like I'm there. I'm rocking the shirt right now. Like, it's just one of those things where, like, it felt different. It felt dangerous. The idea that games were so big that they were on multiple discs felt weird.
I mean, that was insane. I mean, memory cards alone.
Yeah.
Right? In the same way that CDs are fucking cool, they somehow turned this thing where, hey, remember when Nintendo, when there was no load times?
Yeah.
On every game, you could just save, not need to buy anything else? Well, now you need to buy this other thing. But somehow we're going to convince you that's cool.
It's
because you
fucking
need
nuts.
this memory card. You're going to tie this memory card to your personality.
Yeah, you can
And
bring
that
it to your
has
friend's
all of your
house.
saves. You can bring it to your friend's
You
house
can
and
get
show off.
everything get deleted in an afternoon, and you'll lose everything you've ever done. It was
hurts so
great.
bad.
Yeah, it hurt so bad, dude. That was like the dog ate my homework of video games. It
Yeah.
was just like, this is a fucking nightmare. And then from then on, so like the weird thing with me is like I started out as a Nintendo kid because I mean I think a lot of people my age did because you really didn't have a choice. I didn't know anyone that really had Atari. It was just before me. Like it also it looked weird. It was like these wooden boxes where most of the games were kind of shitty. And I know like Jared Petty will come on the show one day and he'll be like, what was he talking about? The Atari 2800 is one of the best video games. Indiana Jones is one of the most revelatory games of all time. I love you, Jared. I didn't connect with it. So it was hard to really be a fanboy. But I loved Nintendo, and then Sega came along and I loved them. And then PlayStation came along. PlayStation was a really important system. I think because it not only introduced this sort of like much more mature ecosystem, but also kind of reintroduced me to a lot of longer, more story-driven games, a lot of cool stuff from Japan. But it's also, I kind of think like it kind of made games cool again. I'm not saying that they weren't, but like
I don't think they ever were though. Right?
They kind of never were.
Because that's the thing is like looking back on it during that generation. I mean, they were definitely like a fun, different thing.
Yep.
I feel like the kind of strokes of coolness that might have happened where Street Fighter 2 in arcades for a moment, but even that nerdy as well.
Mortal
but the
Kombat.
cool kids still played it. But then there was Mortal Kombat. But I feel like once you got to that argument, then it's not cool anymore. If you had to argue over which is better, it's like that's not cool.
Exactly.
But then like Sonic the Hedgehog being the cool version of Mario,
Edgy,
right?
yeah.
But even that didn't reach mainstream cool. It wasn't until PlayStation kind of first knocked that door down where it was like, yeah, it was Resident Evil and it was Metal Gear Solid that I think adults and really, I mean, teenagers can look at it and be like, I can like this and not look like a little kid.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was like, you know, it was like really not like you should care what other people think, but the video game industry, and you say it very well, was like kind of a weird spot back then where we were like yearning to be legitimized, but we didn't really know how to do it. And we were mostly just a bunch of dorky kids with magazines and like funny Mario t-shirts being like, why don't they like us? You know? And the cool thing about Sony is that Sony has Trojan horsed video games.
Metal Gear Solid.
There's that boy. They've Trojan horsed video games into basically entertainment devices for a very long time.
Every generation, right? PS1, my first CD player. PS2, my first DVD player. PS3, my first Blu-ray player.
Exactly.
PS4,
what
does Netflix.
What is it? Yeah, what is it? It doesn't even play 4K.
It doesn't play 4K Ultra
they
HD
really,
Blu-ray.
they really
fucked
shit the
that
bed
up
on
bad.
that one.
That was bad.
God damn it, Shuhei. What the fuck, man?
Figure it out.
Figure it out. Add something. Fucking throw a Zune in there or something. No, so that was huge, right? That you could play your rap CDs on it.
Yep.
Or your, now that's what I call music, probably volume 4 by then. Or you could play video games, right? You could play like Resident Evil, which was this terrifying nightmare survival horror game. Where there were FMVs, you know, and you saw short movies with bad actors and people got squashed. Twisted Metal, yeah.
With its horrible live action cutscenes.
Oh yeah, they're so bad, but they're so like we have this weird like we remember them fondly. We have a great nostalgia for them because they were just so it was so iconic to us at the time, you know. And then that button layout and everything being different. How like the console just felt like a different machine than something Nintendo would make. And so then all of a sudden I was just like, I'm on board with PlayStation too. And so then from then on out, I kind of bounced between the two. And then Microsoft came in.
So before then, not that this is surprising anyone, but Sega Saturn not tickling your fancy at all.
So I think I got burned out on I think I took a wait and see approach with Sega stuff, which in retrospect was the smart thing to do because most of their stuff within like 2 months, we knew this isn't really going to pan out. I had a Dreamcast, but famous Martin Luther King quote. But I specifically was like, I think I got a Sega CD, and then I did that thing where I had like a Genesis plugged into a 32X into a Sega CD with Sonic 2 plugged into Sonic and Knuckles. And it was just this, they called it, it's like a Sega gangbang, basically. It's just like 6 things that shouldn't be having sex with each other, just all really connected. And a lot of them didn't really pan out to be anything. Like I still don't really know what the 32X was or what it did. The Sega CD had a couple of okay games, but nothing really like...
Sonic CD, great.
Sonic CD was great, yeah, for sure. But then you had other stuff like...
Not so great.
Not so great. CNC Music Factory Video Editor, not really a great game. Not really. So like I was sort of hesitant to see what Sega would do next. And I think by then magazines were kind of onto the take and journalists were sort of just like, these guys don't really know what they're doing and they're bleeding money. And you could sort of smell blood in the water with all of that shit. And I started getting worried for them. And so instead of buying their systems on day one, I was like, I'm going to wait. So some of the later Sega stuff I kind of stayed away from. And I think I got a Dreamcast when it was a little cheaper, but mostly kind of stayed away from that stuff because it just didn't feel like a good investment. And by this point, you know, I'm in high school. My money's super limited. And I'm like, it's going to go to PlayStation. It's going to go to GoldenEye, Mario Kart, Perfect Dark, games like that, you know, which I think came out when I was in college, actually. So yeah, it was weird because it's like a lot of your purchasing decisions back then were like, will I be able to get a lot of game out of this? Can I play this with my friends? Does it have a cool story? And will I be playing the system in a year? Which with Sega, that wasn't really a guarantee, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, I could buy a 32X, but like
what the fuck?
The fuck? Like, what's this thing gonna do? Like, I still don't know what it actually did. So, and I've been working in the industry for 10 years now. So it's interesting. Were you into like the whole? Did you get into the whole Sega like Dreamcast to?
I mean, I was born in '89, which means I kind of came in what I believe is the perfect time to get into video games, because by the time I was old enough to play games, there was already a plethora of classics available.
Yep.
So immediately my journey began with the greatest introductory video games 101 of all time with my first console I owned was the Super Nintendo.
Oh my God, yeah.
With the Mario All-Stars plus World Kart.
Okay, so I was talking before about like the Mario track and field duck hunt thing. The Mario All-Stars plus World literally has to be the single most incredible video game cartridge
of all
ever
time.
made.
Like there's no beating it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, here's the old school HD remasters of Mario 1, 2, the real 2, and 3, and fucking World. Like, I remember like playing that. To me, that was just Mario. Like, I didn't really like need to differentiate. So to me, it was kind of just playing through all these Mario games back to back. And it's like, that is unbelievable.
It's incredible to get that, because it's like the cool thing about that too is like you could get stuck in one and then jump into another one and kind of bounce around.
I just bounced around, and I did, and I loved that, and like, God, I love those games so much. But, you know, it was kind of to my detriment in some ways, because while it was great for something like Mario, I feel it kind of hindered my experience with something like Zelda,
right?
Where having Zelda 1, Zelda 2, Link to the Past, all kind of available at the same time, Zelda 1 and 2 never really hit with me, because I was like, what the fuck is this? I don't understand what I'm doing. This is way too hard.
Right.
And it wasn't until years later, I still never beat Zelda 2.
Oh, really? Yeah, I mean, it's a brutally hard game.
I beat Zelda 1 a couple years ago when it came out on GBA, I guess a decade ago.
Yeah.
When it came out on GBA. But, you know, then Link to the Past was kind of like really me getting back into, or not getting back into, getting into Zelda.
And those games never got 16-bit remakes.
Yeah.
So it was sort of just like they were stuck on old generation hardware, which is really weird, right? You would think they would have done like a Zelda All-Stars or something.
At some point. And, you know, who knows? And even with Mario All-Stars, it's weird because I originally played most of the games on the NES because Kevin had one, and like through garage sales and stuff we had. And that's the other thing is like for us, like you talking about your dad taking you to the store and buying all the games, that must have cost hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
For us, we go to a garage sale, and with Kevin's bartering ass mom, we for $9 get an NES, 5 controllers. Why would you even need that? A shoebox full of NES games. So we just had,
which is insane, right?
Which it was kind of like the Netflix of video games back then, so we're kind of just like, well, this will last us forever, and it really did.
It really does. Yeah, it's so cool.
But Mario All Stars is weird because to me those are the definitive versions of Mario 1 through 3, which is blasphemy to so many people because they control a bit differently, and you know, some people don't like the music or whatever. You know, the purest thing.
Yeah.
And like when Mario gets hit, if he's Fire Mario, he doesn't get small. He turns big and then small.
Yes, yeah.
And like, you know, people get upset
People
about
get
that. But to
really
me,
mad.
that's my Mario. Like that's what I knew. And so
I love all that stuff, by the way, because to me they're all really fun. I totally understand where the purists are coming from, but also the people are just like, oh, Luigi's foot gets left behind in the pipe sometimes. And it's like, you don't notice that. He wasn't even really in the first game. It's just a palette swap.
Yeah.
No, that is such a phenomenal treasure of a video game. And the fact that they put all of those on one cart and just handed it to a kid. Like, I don't know if they knew what they were doing.
It was packed in with the SNES.
Yeah, it's fucking insane.
I bought a Super Nintendo and it came with that thing.
That's fucking insane.
God.
Like, it's so hard to explain that now. Like, it's like sort of like if your first free month of PlayStation Plus was like 4 of the best video games ever made.
Yeah, it's crazy. And
Yeah.
so I had that, and that really did last me forever. So I never had Genesis until years later, where I bought one for like $12 at FuncoLand.
Were you
other games and stuff like
Did you feel like you were FuncoLand? Shout out to FuncoLand. Did you feel like you were part of like a console war back then, where like there was a Nintendo versus Genesis thing?
So that's there
totally was in my school.
The funny thing for me is it's like I think that because of the generation I grew up with, that didn't exist. Because to us, it was just video games.
Oh.
Like, we didn't need to choose because at that point, the Super Nintendo and Genesis were cheap enough that most people had both.
Yeah.
Because it was garage sales you're buying and stuff. I guess the thing was, like, it became a war more so with the N64 and PlayStation. But, like, if you had one of those, you were great. You're a rich kid. Like, we didn't really have those guys. Like, I didn't know those guys. You know what I mean?
I knew one kid at school named Arnold who got a Neo Geo. And the Neo Geo was, the original one was like $600 for the console, and the games were like $150 to $200 each. And I remember I specifically was just like, how did you get this? And he was like, my parents got divorced. And I was like, well, fuck, man. Like, I mean, I have a Super Nintendo, but my parents are still married. Yeah, so that was such a weird time because there were wars at my school over this shit. Like, and it's the same way where people make one purchasing decision and they stick to it forever. The same way they vote for people, right? And they're like, oh, he'll never do wrong because this is the way it is, and I'm sticking to my guns on this shit. Some people just got Sega and they were like
Greg Miller.
Greg Miller
Got stuck being a Sega kid.
Yeah, I love talking to him about this shit because it was like he talks about like playing Ghostbusters for the original Sega, Master System and stuff like that. And like,
which I didn't even know the Master System was a thing. I mean, I've talked about this a lot because of Greg, but like growing up, to me, it was just the Genesis was the first Sega console.
Well,
I didn't realize there was another one.
No one really had a Master System that I knew, you know, like the same thing. I think I found out about it until late. I was like, wait, Sega had an NES basically?
Because for me, a lot of my, the history that came with video games and my kind of interest in learning about games as a industry and as this thing that I want to be a part of was Electronic Gaming Monthly issue 100, where they did a top 100 games of all time list. This came out in like November 98 or something like that. And I might be totally off on that, but it was around that time period, just for a frame of reference of like what games and consoles have been out at that point. And I only knew about, like, my dad had a Commodore 64. I grew up with a Super Nintendo, kind of went back to NES and had a Genesis and whatever. And I was aware of the N64 and PlayStation games happening. But to look at this list of 100 games, it was my Bible. I read through this thing every day, reading about these games and these facts of systems I've never even heard of, and trying to piece together all of this shit.
You see, motherfuckers, that's why we make lists at IGN, so we can create Tim Gettys of the future.
It's going to happen.
People are always like, why is this a list? I'm like, well, because it's reader service, because you can sit down and be like, what are the 20 best PlayStation 4 games? And then find out about 15 games you didn't know about.
And even if you're not interested in the game, like you can, like, I didn't know about Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. And reading through this list, I like got an idea of like, oh, people really like Final Fantasy 3, which is 6. And,
yeah.
And oh, Final Fantasy 7 is a big deal. And like, it's like, it makes you kind of go back and be like, to me, I was like, I need to give Zelda another shot. Like, I wrote it off when I was young because I get scared and confused me. But like, I'm going to go fucking back. And I did.
That's so fucking cool that you went back and played that game. I try to play through the original Legend of Zelda for NES about once a year, which is weird.
You try to.
Well, yeah.
I feel you though.
Yeah.
I get it. It's like you hit a point where with some of those older games, you're like,
I'm fucking
good.
like, if you ever saw me play that game, you'd be like, you're a weird dude. Like, I walk into that world and I light a bush on fire, I bomb a door, and I do this, and like I have like, you know, like the best sword and like 299 rupees and like 5 heart containers before I walk into the first level. And I'm just like, I walk into the first level like, what's up?
Come at me, bro. Let's fucking go.
I got everything. Yeah, I'm crazy with that game. But yeah, I think that's like so interesting that like the fact that you are, because you're the same age as my youngest brother, which is really cool because it's like I sort of like had a second childhood through him, and I got to do what magazines were doing for you and what yard sales were doing for you, in that I used to be like, hey, like try this.
Yeah.
Like this is like a classic from like 7 or 8 years ago, but give this a shot. You know?
It's so interesting because we had these neighbors that lived across the street, and we were like, I didn't have any older brothers or anything, so like it was kind of just me bringing it into my brother and Kevin's lives in a lot of ways. But my friend had an older brother, and he was a couple years older than me, and he was really into PC gaming. So he was all like on Half-Life and on StarCraft and on all this stuff. And that was a whole other fucking Diablo. And it's this whole other world. And it never quite transitioned us. Like we never like made that jump.
Me neither.
But it was an interesting thing to see, like, man, there's not only is there all of this shit, there's this whole other world where it's not just console wars. Then there's the war between console and PC gaming.
Oh God,
it's
yeah.
like that's to this day.
That war will never end. And it's weird because we always had a PC at home that could play like shitty games. You know, like my dad didn't buy. My dad bought PCs for what they used to call word processing, which is just typing. Yeah, it's just typing words. But they call it word. He'd be like, I got a word processor in the den. I was like, a computer? Okay, we can use it for other shit, you know? So like you'd play like video games on it, but they wouldn't be great. It'd be like the original Duke Nukem. If you got lucky, you would play like Doom or something like that, right? Yeah. With like the WASD or whatever the fuck. And it's like, it's just never really connected with me because it's also like, I felt weird about using the computer that my dad used for work to play video games, whereas my TV was like specifically solely used for entertainment. And it's the same thing. I'm not into PC gaming now because PCs or my laptop is where I get emails. You know, it's like where work happens. It's also where I produce music or where I check Twitter. There's all these things funneling into it. And it's why I really love like the Switch, because it's just games and Hulu. but mostly just games, you know, and there's no really there's no distractions or anything popping up on it. It's solely a designated video game device. And it's also because it's a portable system, and I've been connected to them for a long time. So then, you know, PlayStation kid, playing some PC games here and there, playing a ton of N64 with my friends and stuff like that. I'm sure you were the same way. You got really into like all the 4-player multiplayer games on N64. Yeah. And that was like, what was really cool about that was I had an N64 in college, and I had gotten one in 96, and I went to college in 99. So the N64 was basically like a couple of years old by then, had a lot of games under its belt, but also like
pretty much done.
Yeah. That was right before the GameCube and a couple of years before, you know, Xbox, PS4, or PS3, PS2, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it, PS2 was 2000.
Yep.
And GameCube and Xbox were 2001.
Yep. And so to still hold on to an N64 then was sort of antiquated, right? But I moved to New York City, and I was at the college dorms at School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. And we would be playing video games really loudly, and people would walk down the hall and knock on the door and be like, "Hey man, like, sorry, but I thought I heard Bowser." We'd be like, "Yeah." And be like, "You guys playing Mario Kart?" "Yeah, man." "Oh, cool. Like, I have like 40 beers and like a pound of weed. Can I come in?" We'd be like, "Yeah, man, come on in. Let's get fucked up and beat Mario Kart together." You know? And so people would come over and we'd play video games, and it became this like social thing where I met friends through video games, which I always thought it was weird that my parents' generation thought that video games were isolating, and that they were keeping us from society, and that it was like this sad thing that people did all alone. Even though I do love that element of it, but video games also do bring people together in a room. You know, bring us together today. They're bringing us together with audience.
It's so cool that there's, you know, shared memories that we grew up a decade apart from each other on different sides
coasts,
of America, and like we still have shared experiences in so many different ways.
It's real, and then we can come at it from different angles. Like it's really weird because like one of my best friends in San Francisco now is a kid that I grew up near in New Jersey but didn't know, and we found out that in 1999 we were at the same fight at my high school. Like two kids fought at high school and beat the shit out of each other. And it was like one of the coolest days ever. It was awesome. It was just this great fight. And my friend Tony's like, he was at that fight and he brought it up one day and I was like, "You were at that fight at my high school, like behind the police station?" That's how bad the cops were. They're like, "There was a fight going on." And so I found out I was at that fight and he saw it from a different angle. And I saw it from a different angle. And we connected on the fact that we saw two people beat the shit out of each other that we barely knew. And I didn't know him, but I know him now. And it's because we had a shared experience, having not known each other, coming at it from different angles, and now we're like forever friends.
Yeah.
And like I feel the same thing with you, where it's sort of like I can talk about video games with you forever, and we didn't grow up in the same school and same demographic, same age group, but we have this thing that connects us because of that.
I mean, dude, video games is such a special thing, and I know the people listening know that, but like you talking about, you know, growing up with the games, that triggers memories for me of just Smash Brothers as a series.
Yeah.
Like, it's so funny how my core friend group has stayed together over the years through the iterations of Smash Bros. It is a game that just, no matter what happens, we drop everything and come together when the new one comes out.
That's so good.
And then it'll keep going, and it'll just be like, to this day, from 1998, when it was just me and my friends with, you know, 8 playable characters in Smash Bros. I guess 12 with the hidden ones.
Yep.
Just beating the shit out of each other for hours on end all night. To Melee every night after high school going home, to Brawl after college, we all get together on the weekend and fucking play.
To after work at IGN, you did it for years.
And with Smash 4, and it's just nuts that like that game just keeps coming back and keeps bringing us together.
Yeah.
Where to this day, at any point, if I were to call one of my friends and be like, "Hey, come over, we're gonna play Smash," it'll be hours of us just doing it. And like,
it's so fucking
we grew
cool, man.
with this franchise.
It's
and like,
so
that's
fucking
nuts.
cool. I love that about that. I remember looking up at like 5 o'clock, and like most people at the end of the day, there's like a bell or a whistle. I don't know if you work like on the Flintstones construction yard or something, there's a loud noise. But most people, like the end of the day, they get up, they punch out, and they rush to go home. But at IGN, at the end of the day, I heard like the smashing of N64 controller buttons and GameCube controller buttons. And I would look up and it would be like you and Nick and Mike Pereira and Mark Ryan, a bunch of other people would get together in the corner on an old fat SD TV with like a big ass on the back.
CRT.
Yeah, a big CRT
Good
TV.
Lord.
And you'd play Smash Brothers. And I remember being like,
every day.
I was like, this is how I met some of my best friends in college. This is how I'm like staying connected with people here, is just like talking to them about it, being in this room where this is happening. Like,
I mean, it's funny you bring that up because, you know, we often talk about how we're in the industry and how that affects things, whatever. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're in video games, you play video games all the time, whatever. There's a lot of misconceptions. A lot of it is correct in this way or that. But what's funny is for being at IGN, it's not always video games that brings people together. Yeah. It's just, oh, we work together. You know, it's like in the same way anybody has friends at work and whatever. But Smash Bros. At IGN, that forged friendships.
It really did.
Across teams.
Across
like,
teams.
That brought people, like normally it was editorial team or video team or sales team. That was like, fuck it. Everyone is going to be friends.
Yeah. Or dudes from engineering would come in and like whoop some ass.
And whoop fucking ass.
Yeah. Salespeople would come in. Like it's really cool that like it doesn't just bring together people like you and me who are like sort of from the same ilk but different sides of the country. It brings together like all walks of life. Yeah. And then it lets them beat the shit out of each other with like hammers and eggs.
Beautiful thing.
Another nonsense.
So okay, then getting into when Xbox joins the scene, what happened there?
So I felt immediately like something's weird about this. Like it felt something about Xbox, and I think that like they have eventually they've now capitalized on nostalgia because it's been long enough. And in the same way Sony has, they're putting out like their own like sort of amiibo, and they have a PlayStation conference, and they're doing shoes and stuff like that. It's when something goes on for long enough, people have nostalgia for it. But when Xbox showed up, to be completely frank, it felt like a bunch of rich people got together and they were like, how do we make money off of these video games? Which that's how Nintendo started. I mean, it's basically Yamauchi being like, how do we make money off of this shit? This is a business. Let's get in there. When Xbox came around, there was something that felt not as enticing because it wasn't foreign. Finding out that was like from Seattle, it was like an American company. It lost a lot of the mystique of like the magic of Tokyo, you know, of like Japan is making these wonderful things and they're getting them early, and they're 3 Final Fantasies ahead of you and 2 Zeldas and 4 Marios, and they have new consoles before we do. Microsoft just showed up and they were like, Generation X gets a box and it's called the Xbox. And you're like, oh, all right, well, what does it do? It's huge. And the controller's huge, and there's a green man, and he fights his friends. And I was like, I don't really get it. Like, I don't really understand it. And like, they were trying to do mascots. They were trying to like appease the PC shooter crowd and stuff like that. And it didn't really connect with me. And then one of my friends had an Xbox, had me over. He's like, you got to just come over, try Halo, try this, try that. And we started playing games. Gulch. Yeah, welcome to Blood Gulch. And we started playing, and I was like, oh, I get it. This is where the GoldenEye kids went. Yep. They went here. Yeah. And they fucking get it. And they're killing it. And this is awesome. And so I bought one. And it was weird because it's like all my favorite genres of like RPGs, platforming, like weird 3D world or 3D adventure games, like the Ocarina of Times, the Super Mario Brothers, the Resident Evils and stuff like that weren't really on Xbox.
Yeah, no.
Like it was like shooting games and racing games and sports games.
The original Xbox had a pretty rough go of it. Yeah. And I remember, I guess this is where the more console war part of my life came into play, where I remember getting into heated arguments with some of Alfredo's friends, because Alfredo was very much an Xbox guy, but even he could understand the PS2 was clearly better. Yeah. And the GameCube, maybe not better, had classic games that like they're Nintendo's.
Yeah, it was the little engine
that was kind of the beginning of them doing their own thing.
Yeah, you know, where they were like, the discs are small and like the it's got a purse handle. Like,
yeah, and it's like Nintendo games was kind of becoming a that meant something, and same way like Ubisoft game means something today. And I remember that like Alfredo's other friend that worked at Best Buy would get into fights with me trying to tell me that the Xbox original had a better library than PS2, and I'm just like, you just can't argue that.
Right.
Like, that doesn't make sense. And it's just so funny looking back. I'm like, why did I even why'd I engage? Like,
Well,
why
yeah,
would I do that?
well, because
looking back, like Xbox, it had some.
It did.
Like Splinter Cell, and granted, that ended up being multi-platform, but it was on Xbox, and that was a huge thing. Star Wars KOTOR,
Yeah.
Halo,
huge.
obviously, and things like that. Like Xbox did a lot of. If PlayStation brought mature games to the table, Xbox was kind of like, hey, we're gonna really like push this. And we're gonna like make this more of a thing of like grown-ups. This is a grown-up thing.
Yeah. You totally nailed it. And I think that's what like initially pushed me away from it. But then I had this sort of renaissance. I was living in New York City. I was actually kind of burned on video games because of the way the N64 panned out. I was like, I don't like how this system sort of petered off and it stopped getting support. It stopped getting games. And there wasn't really, I was watching other people play stuff and I was like, maybe I'm done with video games. Maybe it's time to grow up. And I got an email from Nintendo saying we're having a preview launch party. I'd never been to a preview event, right? In New York City for the Nintendo GameCube. And they're like, come on down. Like our new guy, Reggie, is going to be there, whatever the fuck. And so I get there and there's like just a bunch of people. There's an open bar. So I'm like, this is great. And there's all these GameCubes in a row. And they had Smash Brothers. They had
Wave Race.
They had Pikmin. They had Luigi's Mansion. They had like Rogue Squadron.
Yeah.
And all these games where I'm like, whoa, this is fucking cool. Like Nintendo's doing something weird and different. And so I started paying attention to video games again. And I took my N64 and a bunch of games over to GameStop in by the Manhattan Mall. And I traded them all in and I got a GameCube. Stupid idea. Never trade in your games, like, because there's always going to be a day when you're going to want them. Yeah, and you're going to end up buying them again. I promise you.
It's inevitable. The cycle.
Yeah, exactly. So I got a GameCube, and then Smash Brothers came out, and then I think I was playing Monkey Ball, which is like one of the fucking coolest games of all time.
God, it's so funny. Like the GameCube launch lineup got shit on so hard when it
was
happened.
Weird.
But looking back on it now, it's like everything you just named. I'm like, man, there was some damn good fucking games there.
Especially if you look at like the launch window of like the first 3-4 months.
Well, because Smash Bros came out 2 weeks after. They missed the actual launch, but the GameCube launched, I want to say, on the 15th of November.
Yeah.
And then Xbox was the 18th of November. And then it wasn't until December 3rd or whatever that Smash Bros.
Yeah, and
came out.
it had weird games. It had like, I think it was like Wave Race and Luigi's Mansion and
Rogue Squadron,
Monkey Ball. It had like a weird.
It was Rogue Squadron 2.
Yeah.
Because Rogue Squadron
was
was
the
original
N64
N64.
And it had like a Universal Studios game. Like it was just like, what are you guys doing? This is really odd. But there were some gems in there, right? And I really got into them. And then so I saw the Xbox and I was like, I'm going to get that. And so I saved up money and I got that. And I think I had a PS2 at the time and stuff like that. So it's all of a sudden you're like, I have all the consoles again. And I'm really into this. And then from there, like I found the same shit happening where friends would come together to play video games. And the GameCube, 4 controller ports in the front, like really inspired people to do that. And so you had your memory cards and people would come over.
And it had a handle.
And the handle, you can bring it anywhere, which I think we actually did. And so like people would come over and play Rogue Squadron, or you would play, like Smash Brothers together. Like then it got a Mario Kart game.
See, the irony for me about that generation of consoles was the GameCube had a handle.
Yeah.
I never brought my GameCube anywhere. If my friends had a game, if I was playing Smash Bros, chances are my friends had one too. I would just bring my controller and we'd be good. The console that I did lug around was the Xbox for Halo, for all the fucking LAN parties and like us being in separate rooms playing Capture the Flag. And that was the biggest fucking bulking console.
You had like a radio flyer you dragged with you everywhere. That thing was a huge system. I don't think people realize like just the controller, and even like I remember like that was the first time I remember reading about a video game system like tanking in Japan.
Yeah.
And sort of understanding.
And that was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like that was like, oh fucking, like what you were bringing up earlier. It was the first time that, first successful time that it wasn't this mystical thing of anything had happened. My uncle works in Nintendo and you could actually believe somebody.
Yeah.
Because there's things out there that you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Like they've been playing Mario 3 forever. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or like, I remember Pokemon, I went into a store and I saw Pokemon Gold.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not out for a year. What the fuck? And I convinced my dad to get it for me. And I got it. I was a dumb kid. Didn't realize it was in Japanese.
Yeah.
I ended up beating it, which is one of my... I beat Cuphead and I'm pretty proud of that. But fucking 8-year-old Tim Gettys, who can barely fucking read, 28 years into my life, somehow beat RPG in Japanese.
That is fucking tremendous, dude. That is incredible.
I remember I went to the library because I didn't have a computer, and I printed out a walkthrough that kind of translated what certain things meant. God. One of my greatest achievements, but God, I love that game.
Man,
but Japan literally had this game so much ahead of time.
They had it ahead of time, and then they got the Xbox and they were like, it's too big.
We don't want
I don't
it.
like the games.
Yeah.
It's weird. And then I remember like the internet was a thing back then, and you could read about how shit was doing. And I remember reading like it became a sort of meme, people taking pictures of what the Xbox looked like in Japan or the lack thereof. Like there was no lines for it. There was no excitement for it. But I ended up liking it. And to speed round through everything else, modern consoles, like I ended up getting everyone. The only console or handheld that I haven't bought on day one in the last probably 15 years is the Xbox One X. And it's only because I'm like, I'm going to wait. Yeah, and it doesn't really count, right? It doesn't really count.
Because if you bought an Xbox One,
so I have like a day one edition Xbox One. I have a PS4 Pro, got a Vita, got a PSP, got a PSP Go, got every DS. I have a Switch, which I fucking adore. And so like I'd say like of the last 10 years, some of my favorite games to come out were stuff like Resident Evil 4, which might be longer than 10 years.
Definitely longer than 10 years
at this point, right? Yeah, God. When did Wind Waker come out? Like probably 13 years ago? 2002? Yeah. So probably let's go 15 years. Yeah. So Wind Waker, Resident Evil 4, Killer 7.
2002.
Yeah, Killer 7 was one of my favorite games.
Killer 7, yeah, wow.
Which is really fucking cool that I'm friends with the people who make that game.
That's so
and
rad.
it's just like I run into them all the time. Like when I'm at events, they specifically like look for me so we can hang out and stuff like that. It blows my mind. And so yeah, I've gotten every console since. And then around 2007, I started a website where I was writing about video games, but like doing comedy, like a comedy angle.
What was it called?
It's called The Minus World, and it's long gone now. You can probably find it like in some weird pockets. But it was a video game comedy website, and I did it for about a year and a half. And we ran ads with like Sega and Rockstar, and I snuck into Comic-Con and like with business cards I printed on my mom's computer and her word processor. And I got to Comic-Con and I went and we played games before they came out. And me and my team of like 3 or 4 people and one video guy went home and like basically shot preview videos where we were like, hey, we just got to play the new Sonic game. Like, here's what we thought. Like we did like IGN on an incredibly small scale. And we started becoming cool people, like good with like Kotaku and Joystick and all the other sites at the time. And I would email their weekend editors and be like, hey, I don't know if you guys like have any like if you're looking to like cross promote any content this weekend, but we just did a piece about how every character in Punch Out is racist. And it's really funny. You should read it. We hired an illustrator to do the art piece for us, and here's a preview we did at Comic-Con, and they would. Owen Good and Brian Crescente and a bunch of other old school Kotaku dudes would put our articles up on the weekend, and our site blew up. And then I got a call from Will Tuttle and Tal Blevins at IGN, and they're like, do you want to move to California and like work for IGN? And I was like, holy shit.
Were you at GameSpy for a while?
I was at GameSpy for a while. So GameSpy was basically GameSpy and Joystick, or One Up. GameSpy and One Up were like the small like brother, sister, like sort of half sister, half sibling sites next to IGN. And IGN was this big thing, and we were over in the corner, like in the shadows. But we still got to go to the same parties and the same events.
It was all the same thing.
Yeah, it was actually kind of cool because like when a new game would come out, IGN would get 3 copies and GameSpy would get 3 copies. And GameSpy had 5 people and IGN had 50. So they'd be fighting, like Greg and Damon, all those guys would be fighting over like, the new Splinter Cell game. And I'd be like, I have my own copy. I get to take it home. Yeah. So it was kind of great. And then so like, I just became even more connected to video games than I ever was. And you know what it's like working in the industry. It's like you never turn it off. It's just always there. And so, I've covered I bought a Wii at launch. I've covered every launch since, I think like the DS or the Vita were some of the ones. So I started at IGN in 2009. Yeah. And so it's 2018.
What blows
now.
my mind is I always thought you were there forever. Because I looked at you as one of the like OG motherfuckers. Old school guys, yeah. Like I started a year after you did.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Which is really weird to think about.
I know.
Because like there's like when One Up wasn't even there when I first started. Like One Up was purchased later. Right. GameSpy was, but that was when you guys were on the 2nd floor.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were on 3rd, and then eventually everyone moved to the 4th.
Yeah, and I wasn't even on GameSpy at that point. So I was just like IGN proper. And I remember it being like when they had a huge round of layoffs and like 120 people were laid off, and I came into work and I'm like, do I have a job? And they're like, well, GameSpy is no longer what it used to be, and now you're going to IGN. And I was like, so I got promoted?
Yeah.
I'm like, you laid off people and you promoted me, and I'm like, I don't feel like celebrating over this. But
yeah, it was such a weird time. And I remember when I first started, I was the first intern that IGN had, especially the video team had, in years, because there was this huge scandal with Fox, and
they weren't allowed to have
interns.
It's like a California thing.
For whatever reason, Eric Hart believed in me and was like, we're fighting for this guy. And like, thank God he did, because I'm here now because of that. But they didn't really teach me what everyone did.
Yep, that's the IGN way is basically just like it's just like you show up and they're like, there's your word processor, have fun,
like fucking do something. And like I thrive in that type of environment in terms of like figuring shit out and doing stuff.
It's very sink or swim.
But in terms of understanding who does what and why and how, like you really had to figure that out yourself. And it got weird because I remember again looking at you as like one of the dudes. Like I thought that you ran shit,
right?
And it's so funny because I was so wrong about so many things. I thought that Eric Hart fucking ran shit. I thought Nick Scarpino was just like a fucking like peon on the video team because he was just such a funny, goofy ass guy. He was such and then weird, he ended up running shit. When I found that out, I was jaw dropped. I was like, you?
Yeah.
You're the manager?
Well, it's funny because I ran. Yeah, he was a manager, and it was like, what the fuck? He was like this chain smoking alcoholic shit talker who would just like, he would like, I would walk in, and he'd be like, hey, how's it going? And smack my ass.
It'd be like, okay.
Well, all right. Well, he still does that. There's a hashtag for that now, you guys.
It was funny because I remember, I don't even remember what it was that you were doing, but like people told me Altano makes the art.
Yeah.
He does the funny stuff and he makes the art. If you need art, you go to him and ask him to make art.
Yeah, that was I got sort of pigeonholed by people as like an art school, as like an artist and like a comedian, which is great. But it's also like, no, it's like I have a serious side to me. I have a nuanced side to me. Like I will sit down and talk to you on any podcast about anything. And it took a lot to sort of break that, right? And you know what it's like. You get
especially
typecasted.
when we were there at IGN in those days, it was kind of the third class of IGN.
Yep.
And at that point, there's been an established Damon's on camera.
Yep.
Chobot's on camera.
Yep.
You know, Greg Miller, sometimes we'll let him say things as long as he's not on camera. He can say them on audio things.
Yeah.
And it was like that weird breakthrough point of things kind of changing where the editorial team was actually starting to be allowed to say things and have opinions.
Well, and like what they were like, Tim films videos, and then you were like, no, motherfucker, Tim makes videos.
Exactly.
Like Tim,
there's the difference.
And you came in, and you're like, here's a video that does 1 million views.
And then they were like, yeah, but how do we do that with Damon in front?
Exactly.
It got really weird.
It's tough, yeah.
But it was funny though, because then I remember I always connected with you because like you shared that vision of you. I grew up with the YouTube shit. You didn't grow up with the YouTube shit, but you got the YouTube shit.
Yeah,
you believed in it, and you were like, "Hey, there's content. Let's do the content." And now we all get to do it. And now it's a different world.
It's so
but
great.
I remember being like told to just go if you need art, go to Altano. And I remember going, "Hey, can you make me a thumbnail?" And like I felt so shitty doing that.
Well, it was funny because like we have a design team that does that specifically.
But I wouldn't have fucking
But they're like, Brian will do it faster, like
and better.
You know.
And to be fair, at that point you did. Like you made great shit for the dumb things we did, and we only made like one comedy video together.
I know.
And years, and then, like we got separated in such different ways. But we did the Mario is miserable.
You worked on that.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Google Mario is miserable. IGN. That was. I can't believe we got away with that one.
I can't either.
I'm excruciatingly fat in the video, and I'm talking to Naomi Kyle, who's just like she looks like a child, like she's so young. We're both kids in this video, and it's basically it was just all improv of me like talking to me as Mario talking to Peach like she's my girlfriend and being like, hey, like you fucking gotta stop getting kidnapped.
Yeah.
Like this is a tremendous like this is killing me, like and she was just like I kind of like it, like it's fun, and I was like you have no idea. Like what happens every time you get kidnapped, like it is a fucking nightmare for me.
God, it was just it was so funny because like I was still kind of the wide-eyed intern at IGN, not really knowing what was going on, but getting opportunities to do things like I was like, this is where it's at.
It felt dangerous,
and
right?
I remember one time walking into you in editing bay 3. And it was like after work, and I was like, oh, what are you doing? And you're like, oh, like we shot this stupid thing, and like it's not gonna ever happen. But like we're just working on it, and it was bad news.
Yeah, it was bad news.
Which was like the early baby version of what would turn into Up at Noon.
Into Up at Noon.
And
it was me and
you
Scott Bromley.
Yep. And like it was like the intro was you breaking into IGN and like doing the fucking show. And like I thought it was so fucking funny.
It's still on Facebook somewhere. The pilot, it's really bad because it's us doing Weekend Update for video games. And there's 3 clocks behind us, and one of them says like Raccoon City, one says Hyrule, one says like, fucking Vice City or whatever, Mushroom Kingdom or something like that. And it's us doing over a fucking laugh track. It's us doing like 2-camera joke reads of monologue jokes that we wrote in Greg's old apartment. That's where this shit gets really fucked up, because Bromley used to live in Greg's apartment before Greg moved in there. Colin moved in with Scott, who was Scott Bromley, as his roommate. Scott moved out. Greg moved in. You guys started piloting Game Over Greggy in there. Greg became the host of Up at Noon, which I became lead writer for, and co-host. And so the thing I had piloted with Scott in that apartment then became the place where Greg lived, where you guys had started your company, which then became Kind of Funny. So out of like those conversations came Kind of Funny, The Comedy Button, Up at Noon.
It's just
Greg
crazy.
Miller.
It's
like all of that came
it.
from this one sort of group of people that happened to be around at the same time.
And then all of us just being like, hey, IGN's awesome, but it could be more awesome.
Yeah. What if we did this?
Yeah. It's so funny to see.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And it's so cool to see IGN now where it's like that vision has been a reality. It's become a reality of what you guys do on any of the podcasts, on any of the shows. It's like it is now the irreverent thing that we wanted it to be for so long.
Totally. And it's like, it's what I moved across the country for, because I always loved comedy. I've always loved video games. I've always thought that they should go together more, because video games are something that I cherish and I love, and they're goofy and endearing. And the way they bring friends together to like talk shit and fight and argue and laugh and joke. There are people out there that think that video games are only serious and they only really play the tonally serious ones. And there's something wonderful about that. But like, not everything is The Last of Us. There's a lot of games that are goofy. And even in The Last of Us, like there's a giraffe, and spoilers, and like Ellie can't swim. And that's stupid. That's a joke. Like, it's a running joke that she doesn't know how to swim in that game. And so I think there's a comedy to come from that. And it's like the fact that we can make kind of positive, exciting, uplifting shows that are all goofy and irreverent and bring together people, I think is sort of like, it's this perfect way of executing on this vision that I think we were always kind of destined to do, and that are like the gamers have always wanted and always needed and always looked for. Not to like pat ourselves on the back, but it's like the way video games have brought everyone together in the world is fucking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and to go off that point about the patting ourselves on our back, I don't think that it's that, because, I see this all going back to what we were talking about with Cuphead, of me wanting to be Cuphead to see all that was there. I see this as a tribute to EGM issue 100.
Yep.
Where it's just like us talking about this and sharing our experiences, sharing with the people. We're lucky that like patting ourselves on the back is just as much patting the listeners on the back, because they're part of this, right? Mm-hmm. What you were talking about earlier about playing video games where you need to play for it to keep going. If people aren't listening to us, we can't keep doing this. And it's like, there's people out there, so many people in our community have launched their own podcasts, launched their own websites with like written articles, because that's still a thing.
It's awesome. Like, it's so cool that it's still happening.
And it's crazy that I am now in a position where I'm becoming a fan of our people that we inspired, when really it's just like, you take some, you give it back, you take more, you give it to someone else, and just keep going.
I interviewed Shigeru Miyamoto at E3 a couple years ago.
And how cool is that?
Yeah, and it was just like, and it's one of those things where it's like, I could be having the worst day of my life, and there are like a few places in the universe where I can go. And one of them is sitting in that room with Shigeru Miyamoto and Bill Trinan, who is translating, who's like now a friend of mine. It's so cool.
He's so awesome.
He's so awesome. Yeah, Bill's so great. And I said something that made Miyamoto laugh, and Bill translated it. It was one of those, when you tell a joke with a translator, it's super weird, because it's like, you tell a joke, the translator hears the joke, laughs, tells the joke to the guy who's it's being translated to. He hopefully laughs, because by then it's just sort of like echo, 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 and then it comes back to you, and then you hear the translation. And so I said something that made Miyamoto laugh, and afterwards I was like, hey, like, it felt really good to make you laugh, because you have been making me smile for 30 years. And like he gave me this big handshake and this big warm smile, just this infectious smile, like, and yeah, and the thumbs up, and the thumbs up, and it just like totally made my life. You know, it's just one of those things where it's like I could never begin to give back to you what you've given me, but if I in 4 seconds can like make you smile for just the tiniest bit, then it's like that's a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
That's a little bit, just like beating Cuphead or
It's
know.
awesome, man.
Yeah.
Video games are cool.
They're fucking great. You guys should check them out.
Brian, thank
Check out
you.
this video game.
Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been awesome. We need to have you back more.
Whenever you need me,
And
I'll play hooky and come back.
You need to get me for NBC.
I would love to have you on
do
NBC.
that anytime.
We'll get back together.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Until next week, I love you. Hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, click here to subscribe to youtube.com/kindoffunnygames. If you want other stuff like Marvel reviews, click here for youtube.com/kindoffunny. You subscribe there. It's great for everybody. Right there. Support us on Patreon. If you give us money, we'll be able to have Brian more. That doesn't really work that way.
Did you put it over me?
But yeah, it's right over you.
Oh.
Right over you.
Oh, hey.
And I don't ever remember what goes over here, but
The heart.
something.
The love of the heart. Right there. Perfect. Big old
Put
heart.
a link to my heart will go on.
Put a link to my heart will go on. Thank you.
Now we're going to the chat. So we talked to the chat for just a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
A little bit of a post show. I want X23 says Bill's one cool dude. He is. Bill Trennan is the homie.
He really is. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for entertaining me and having me on. This has been great. Is this Orioto?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. His art is fucking awesome, man. I'm so glad you're a fan.
What's more unreal than the art is the rate at which he puts out new. Every week, there's new piece he does.
Still?
Every single week. You can support him, patreon.com/Orioto. And he takes commissions, he takes requests. And yeah, every single week he puts out new art. And it's just insane. I update the background maybe like once every couple of months, but it's...
Oh my God.
Nuts.
Eric Riley says, Brian, I was born in Hackensack. What's up? Yeah, Hackensack is like 2 towns over from where I grew up. My grandmother lived there. Shout out to
Hackensack.
Hackensack.
There you go.
Yep. Man,
James Rodriguez says, just look for the bad news video, and wow, it's so crazy to watch.
I look like a fat child in that video. It's really great.
Dude, looking back at a lot of the old IGN originals or like that era stuff, there's just some weird shit going on.
Yeah,
it's so awesome.
It's kind of odd to look at stuff that I did 5 or 6 years ago, or that you did 5 or 6 years ago, in the same way we look at like movies from the 80s or 90s.
That's exactly what it's
like. Dude, early up at noon
ago.
feels like it was a direct to VHS show.
Oh my God. Early up at noon it was
right?
bad. It was straight up bad.
It was straight up bad for sure.
But at the time it felt, I mean, you know what's funny about it is, my honest opinion is, when it was happening, I was like, this isn't good.
Yeah.
But now looking back on it, I'm like, it had to be what it was. And what it was way better than I gave it any credit for.
And it was also...
Up at Noon fucking changed things, man.
It did.
That show changed what IGN did, will be.
The way we do interviews, the way I still do interviews to this day, I mean, I owe a ton to the sort of energy and format that Greg had. I mean, it's weird because Greg and I are peers, right?
Yep.
And we got in at the same time. He was there a couple years before me, but I mean, I don't have to fucking mansplain Greg Miller to you motherfuckers. It's Greg Miller.
But like, the thing about Greg is there is a magic to him interviewing.
Yeah.
There's just this skill that he has that he'll get the right story, and he always seems like he's more prepared than I know he is. I know how prepared he is going into certain scenarios, and he just fucking kills it in a way that, like, it's my job too, and I'm not that good at it. I'm fine. I can get it across. But man, Greg, there's just this real magic to it. Yeah.
It's and then I think it was the suit. I think it was the suit. It was the suit
that
they wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him get a new suit for like 2 years, and he just wore this. I don't know no one was there to tell us no. So like he wore the suit, and I had a thing where I had this like baby blue blazer, or no, it was like a dark blue blazer, and then like a baby blue hoodie, and I wore it in the pilot episode to play like this skeevy Capcom PR guy, because I always played characters in the show, and I just kept wearing it every week. And it just became, we just got like dress codes basically. Like we just tricked ourselves into thinking like, it was like, you just wear the same shit every single week. And eventually we're like, let's stop doing this.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, once the original Up at Noon kind of set if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh no. And then
God,
eventually
yeah.
it started looking real damn good.
It
And now
was-
you look at it and it's fucking baller as shit.
Yeah, now
And
it's
granted,
crazy.
Now it's a totally different
Yeah.
beast. And it's just like, I mean, now it is what I mean, I'm so happy that Up at Noon current day is the show that it is, because it's just like, we always talk about
Yeah.
this, but like the transition of us leaving IGN and kind of leaving you guys with, and I'm in a weird place with this because like I had nothing to do with Beyond. I had nothing really to do with Up at Noon at all either.
Mm-hmm.
I was an associate producer, whatever the fuck that means.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah. But us leaving, but specifically with Greg and Colin, like you guys had to deal with all the fucking backlash of the bureaucracy of Beyond and Up at Noon.
Yeah,
where it wasn't
yeah.
really up to you guys whether or not the name was changed. And it's so funny because had the name just changed,
Yeah.
had you guys just launched whatever PlayStation podcast, you wouldn't get any of the bullshit that you totally don't deserve.
Yeah, it was always weird to me because when like they don't change the name of the Yankees when like a bunch of players leave and a bunch of new players start. It's always just the Yankees. And to me, Beyond is an iconic brand name in that like when we leave, other people who really love PlayStation can and should come in and talk about PlayStation on that show. It should always be a place for that at the world's biggest video game site. But for other people, Beyond is a band. And when the lead singer quits the band, like you don't just put in somebody else, right? You don't just like put in the guy from Nickelback, or not to say that's who we are, but you don't just replace the lead singer. So it's very tough for people, right? But I think a lot of people stuck around, and then we had that era where we were doing our show and PS I Love You was happening and everyone was kind of happy. And now I don't know if anyone's happy or if
I don't know if anyone's
I don't
happy.
know. It's tough to say, but we love making that show. We love making it ours. To me, a lot of the spirit of that original version of that show is still in it today. But then, you know, people have rose tinted goggles where they look back and they're like, the old show was so serious. And it was like, now they got really goofy on the old show. And it's like, well, the new show is too goofy. And it's like, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe we are. But, you know, like you have to find who you are. And I think it's so much better to do that than to come in. Like you guys didn't immediately start making IGN content at Kind of Funny. You started making Kind of Funny content, and it's inspired by what you knew.
Absolutely.
You know, because we all come from the same place. But ultimately, like you want to find your voice, and you don't want to come out and like you didn't go like I'm gonna do a Damon Hatfield. I'm gonna do a Greg Miller. You're like I'm gonna be Tim.
Yeah,
and like
totally.
I'm gonna be Brian. Like
and I think that's just the if I were to have made the calls, I would have called it something different for you guys, just because I feel like people love you for good reasons, and you deserved a different shot than the one you got. And then Up at Noon was just kind of a retreading of that, which was stupid because Up at Noon was your show as well.
Yeah, that was weird.
But even then, I get it. You know, it's hard to explain to people the intricacies of it all, and then introducing Max into it all, which is so unfair to Max.
Yeah,
Max got thrown like. Max got given the biggest double-edged sword of all time.
I know.
Where it's just like, on one hand, he is not the face of IGN. Holy shit, what an upcoming for him. And on the other side, it's like, yeah, but everyone's going to hate you.
Well, it's like you get to work with your best friend and then like some of the meanest people in the world. And it was just like, it's like, there's only so many times I can hug you, you know, because the audience has to help there too. But, you know, it's a lot of growing with all that. And I think it's like, I'm totally happy with where it is. I understand a lot of the animosity from some perspective. What sucked for me was that I felt like it put a wedge through like the relationships of like people like you and me and like me and Greg. And all of a sudden we're like, I felt like we were on opposing teams.
And that's the biggest problem.
That sucks.
It felt like because there was so much of a wedge with tweets sent to us or groups sent to us where it felt like there had to be sides, and it felt like we were responsible for what our community was saying versus your community, when so many of the people are the same people.
It's the same people, yeah.
It's just like, what's going on? And that's why I'm so happy to see where IGN is at now.
Yeah.
And to see that you guys are happy, and it's I mean, there's always going to be idiots being dumb shits, right?
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you love your job. You get to do cool things. And IGN, I mean, I'm hoping I'm not making it sound like a horrible place. I owe IGN so much. I loved working there.
Until
the day I left. And had Kind of Funny not been a thing, I would have stayed there for many years.
Yeah, I mean, those weren't crocodile tears in your goodbye fix video. Like you were legit.
Totally,
like,
totally
you know.
real. And I loved that place. However, us leaving was so key and instrumental into turning IGN into what it is now. And I think IGN's better now than it ever has been, because for the first time ever, it's not, these people are on camera. These people write things. It's, who has something to say.
Yeah. Then
Let them say it.
Yeah. And that's so important. I think it's just like, it's one of those times where it takes a sort of situation like that for us to pause and go, and for you guys to pause to be like, well, what are we? Like, who are we? Who am I? Like,
Yeah.
Where do I sit with all this? And it's like, I've always looked up to dudes like Adam Sessler, because this is what's fucked up about us, is we don't really have older brothers in the video game industry. We don't really have people that we can be like, what does this job look like at 45?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like at 50? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah.
No, right? Because you're mostly
nuts.
just doing it now.
I mean, luckily, like on our side of things, which is a little bit different than IGN, we have Rooster Teeth to look up to. You know,
Yeah.
so looking up at guys like Bernie Burns, I'm like, okay, like he's pushing that, like I'm over 40 and here's what it looks like, and I'm like, I can fuck with that.
Yeah, you're like, I could do that.
You know, like that sounds like a cool path. But with what you're saying about, you know, being more just on the games journalism, which games media.
Yeah,
I don't
games
know, whatever
media,
the fuck you want to
whatever
call
it
it.
is.
It's not journalism.
I mean, because the thing is, like, my favorite thing in the world to do is talk, is podcast, right? And like, you know, I'd like to think I'm pretty good at it. So I know that when they're like, don't put the weird bald goblin on TV anymore, I'll be like, you can't fucking shut me up. I'm going to start a Patreon. I'm going to call up all my friends. We're going to talk about video games all day long, and there's nothing you can do about it. And like, when this shit goes south, when IGN's like, all right, old man, you're done. Then I'll just be like, hey, like, you know, I'll come over here. I'll come knock on the door. I'll be like, let's make some shows. Right? I'll go everywhere else. You know,
shit.
Like, I think that's the fun thing about it. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody in the chat.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Like I said, we need to do this many more times.
We got a question that I saw a couple times. I'm trying to find who it was. He said basically, what's the process of giving a game Havoc Maker? Brian, what's the process of giving a game 10 at IGN? I just went through this yesterday or the day before. We just gave Celeste a 10. And a bunch of us got in a room and we said, like, this is what we're going to do. You know, the reviewer was like, I really feel strongly about this. And we sort of like, you sort of grill them, right? You're sort of like, well, like, what does this add to the medium, to the genre? Will games for years from now be referencing this game? Will they be taking things from it? And I said, do you have a history of overrating games and regretting it? And he was like, no, I don't. But I'm like, I just had to ask you that because, like, I don't know. There's games that, like, I was like, this is the best game ever, and then a year goes by and you're like not really. So yeah, it's not at all like someone just publishes the 10 and goes up. It's a very, very important thing for us because we don't do it often. So yeah, we want to make sure we get it right. Yeah. Unlike you, Skyward Sword.
I brought that up today on Kind of Funny Games Daily.
We did not get that right. Yeah. I will flat out say that.
Oh, man. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for this excellent show, excellent post show. I feel good about everything. Until tomorrow, you can join us on twitch.tv/kindoffunnygames at 11 a.m. for the Kind of Funny Morning Show. I don't remember who's on tomorrow. I think it's Nick and Andy. Kind of Funny Games Daily is definitely me and Andy. So that's going to be fun. What's that face, Kev?
Oh, I think I was agreeing with you.
Yeah. Okay. I think I was agreeing with you. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks for having me. That was great, man.